Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. It's a pleasure, Olaf, to welcome you to Downing Street. The friendship between our two countries, between Britain and Germany, has become even more vital since Putin launched his barbaric onslaught against Ukraine, bringing war into our continent. I know that Britain and Germany share exactly the same sense of horror and revulsion at the brutality being unleashed, including the unconscionable bombing of refugees fleeing their homes this morning. The attack at the train station in eastern Ukraine shows the depths to which Putin's once vaunted army has sunk, at least 39 people killed and dozens wounded on a train platform crowded with women and children. It is a war crime indiscriminately to attack civilians, and Russia's crimes in Ukraine will not go unnoticed or unpunished. Germany and the UK also share exactly the same conviction that Putin must fail in Ukraine, which is why we're working together in the G7 to toughen our sanctions and target every pillar of the Russian economy in order to cut off funds from his war machine. The UK and the EU have announced new sanctions this week, and just today, we in the UK have imposed new asset freezes and travel bans. We will also agree on the importance of weaning ourselves off dependence on Russian oil and gas and ensuring that our energy security cannot be threatened by a rogue state. This is not easy for any of us, and I applaud the seismic decisions taken by Olaf's government to move Germany away from Russian hydrocarbons. Today, we have agreed to maximise the potential of the North Sea and collaborate on energy security and on renewables, where Germany and the UK lead the way in new technology. We cannot transform our respective energy systems overnight, but we also know that Putin's war will not end overnight. That's why Britain and Germany have joined dozens of allies to supply Ukraine with defensive weapons. Last week, the UK convened a donor conference which raised weapons and equipment for Ukraine worth over £1.5 billion, or 2.5 million items of military kit. Today, I can announce that the UK will send a further £100 million worth of high-grade military equipment to Ukraine's armed forces, including more Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles, which fly at 3 times the speed of sound, another 800 anti-tank missiles, and precision munitions capable of lingering in the sky until directed to their target. We will also send more helmets, night vision, and body armour on top of the 200,000 pieces of non-lethal military equipment the UK has already dispatched. But Olaf and I agree that our two countries and our allies must go further and provide more help to Ukraine. The Europe we knew just 6 weeks ago no longer exists. Putin's invasion strikes at the very foundations of the security of our continent. But his ambition to divide us has demonstrably failed. On the contrary, he has succeeded in uniting Europe and the whole transatlantic alliance in support of Ukraine and in strong solidarity with each other. Putin has steeled our resolve, sharpened our focus, and he has forced Europe to begin to rearm together to guarantee our shared security. Britain and Germany will work together to ensure that our armed forces are fit for the future, including with our joint effort to manufacture state-of-the-art Boxer armoured vehicles. We will hold a joint cabinet meeting between our two governments within the next year. Our defence ministers will meet before the NATO summit in June, and I look forward to joining you, Olaf, at Schloss Elmau for the next G7 summit. We face the new reality created by Putin's invasion. I know that Britain and Germany will meet this challenge together as passionate advocates of democracy and freedom, and both committed friends of Ukraine. Thank you. Over to you, Olaf. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Boris, thank you for having me in 10 Downing Street. We both have met quite often the last days and weeks, and we have phoned much more. The last time we met was in Brussels in NATO and G7, and I'm very happy that we now have the chance to discuss together here. Es ist gut und wichtig, sich in der aktuellen Lage und diese
It is good and important to exchange views in the current situation, and I'm particularly delighted that we can have this exchange here today in London personally and not have to rely on telephone or VTCs amongst the G7 and the many other formats and meetings that we're having. And it's good progress that we meet here. Germany and the UK are long-standing allies and partners, and we will remain and continue to be that, although our friends have decided a while ago to not be part of the European Union anymore. The UK and Germany are close allies, also when it comes to the challenges and tasks ahead. It is with horror and indignation that we both are looking towards the east these days and weeks. We're looking to Russia's illegal attack on Ukraine. This war is devastating. It inflicts death, unfathomable suffering, and terrible destruction on Ukraine. The images from Bucha, Mariupol, and other places, the dramatic attack that we have learned about today, all of this is shocking indeed, and it has to be said clearly, it is atrocious. It is an atrocious war that inflicts terrible destruction and has many victims in Ukraine. Killing civilians is a war crime, and the Russian president bears responsibility for these war crimes. Boris Johnson and I absolutely share this assessment, and we see ourselves in complete agreement with large parts of the international community, for which law and moral principles continue to be the yardstick. This is why we support Ukraine actively with all the options that we have. In the civilian sector, Germany is the largest bilateral donor since 2014. And after the Russian attack on Ukraine, Germany revised its decade-long position and for the first time sent weapons and military goods to a war zone. And we continue to supply arms to Ukraine. We do this together, and we actually exchange views on this in order to bolster the defense of Ukraine against the Russian invasions. And, of course, we need to do everything in order to stop the senseless killing. And this is why I call upon Russia again to finally agree to a ceasefire and to withdraw its troops. We absolutely need to allow for humanitarian access and open safe corridors for people who want to leave, and we mustn't see military actions and have bombings on refugees time and again. This war needs to stop immediately. A pivotal and central element of our strategy is to impose drastic costs on Russia for this war of aggression. And this is why it is right that we have agreed in all the structures that we are part of to impose sanctions. That holds true for the G7. We also talked about this in the various phone calls that we had with other partners together, and we discussed this within the framework of NATO. We impose sanctions on the financial sector, on the Russian central bank, an extraordinary process that we haven't done, something that is unprecedented. I'm talking about sanctions on the Russian economy. And these sanctions are highly effective because, indeed, Russia is dependent on imports in the field of technology. Russia cannot replace these elsewhere in the global markets, and Europe and North America and Japan, South Korea, many countries that gather as democratic states are those who have the best and the most sophisticated technologies. And of course, it is also important to affect and hit the inner circle of the president and the oligarchs. And I explicitly want to state this in London as well. And I'm grateful that the sanctions were widened on many persons that are part of this circle of people. We have just accepted and adopted a fifth sanctions package within the European Union. We're not going to import coal anymore, and I'd like to use this opportunity to clearly state Germany is already starting to wean off its dependence, and we're diversifying our sources. We are investing large scale in order to establish the technical and physical infrastructure that are necessary in order to import gas via the northern German shores. And we are also going to make sure with legal measures that there are no legal difficulties, but that we can implement our decisions quickly. We have imposed sanctions on the banking sector. We hit oligarchs, and we're going to continue to work in this regard. Unity is crucial. The unity of the European Union, the G7, the unity of NATO, the transatlantic unity, all of this is essential, and Putin did not expect this. He was certain that we would disagree, and he had to witness our unity, and he will continue to experience our unity. One of the terrible consequences of this terrible war is the fact that a large number of people had to leave the country. Millions of people had to flee Ukraine. Many countries in Europe have hosted refugees, in particular those along the borders, Poland, for instance, or Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, and we are very grateful to these countries. We know that further countries such as the Czech Republic, Austria have hosted and received large numbers, and Germany is part of these countries as well. The biggest share of refugees has reached Poland, more than 2 million. We have more than 300,000 refugees in Germany. And this is why we're happy and grateful if many countries would practically participate in hosting refugees, because this will be a major task and challenge ahead. We don't know how refugee movements will evolve. We're seeing a different type of migration now than in other years. We have women and children, the elderly, and many people who are sick and disabled and need our support. We will shoulder this together, but against the backdrop of the developments in this war, we can't predict how many will follow, whether these families are able to return or whether the men are going to follow. We cannot predict this at present, but what we can say now is that we stand in solidarity, that we want to lend support to those who seek refuge. And we talked about this as well. And the UK also wants to lend a contribution to this effort. Boris mentioned it. We are going to intensify our cooperation on all levels. We're going to have government consultations, an established consultation. We're going to begin and hosting a cabinet meeting at the beginning of the next year. Our foreign ministers are going to resume and continue their strategic dialogue. There are many challenges and topics at hand, topics related to the conflict in Ukraine, matters pertaining to defense and security, pertaining to climate, people-to-people exchange, mobility, and I mentioned it as well, questions pertaining to migration. We want to make progress and intensify relations between our two countries. We can build upon about a long-standing friendship, but this is what's important here. We both share the conviction that our relations are good when they don't only exist between the two of us, the heads of state, but when they're also when they exist between the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olaf. Let's take some questions from the media. We've got 6 of them. Nick Eardley, BBC.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Chancellor Scholz first. how do you defend the fact that the European Union has sent 35 billion euros to Russia for energy since the start of the war, but only $1 billion in aid? Do you really think that Germany has gone far enough, fast enough, to move away from Russian energy? And Prime Minister, how far are you prepared to go in sending weapons to Ukraine without escalating the conflict further? And if I can ask a quick domestic question. This week you put up taxes for millions of working people. Will you be telling the Chancellor that everyone in his household should be paying all their taxes here in the UK?
Olaf, on the...
Schönen Dank für die Frage. Thank you. Just to give you a very clear answer, we are doing all we can, and we are doing a lot. I think it is a very strong decision that we took to go away from the use of fossil resources. We invest into becoming the country that will be just using renewables for the electricity we know and for the energy supply we need. And this will be with offshore windcraft, this will be with wind on land, onshore, this will be the solar, and we will invest into our grid. This will take place in approximately 20 years. And this is really a very tough agenda, to make it clear. And right this week we have had a decision in our cabinet on the first legislation projects that are linked to that, because we will increase the velocity of all these activities, and this also means to change a lot of legal restraints we have today. On the other hand, it is absolutely necessary that we understand that for the time in between, it will be important to get the supply of fossil resources from other places than from Russia. And this is why we prepare for being successful with this in the question of coal and oil since December of the last year. And we are doing so and working very hard to make this happen. This is why we could act aligned according to the decisions that we proposed and made together with our friends in the European Union on how to get out of the use and import of coal from Russia. We are actively working to get independent from the import of oil, and we think that we will be able to make it during this year. And we are actively working to get independent from the necessity of importing gas from Russia. This is as you may imagine, not that easy, because it needs infrastructure that has to be built first. So pipelines to the northern shore of Germany, regasification ports that make it possible that, for instance, LNG ships could give their supply to the gas grid in Germany. But we are doing, and we already started preparing this before the war began, because we knew that this problem will come up. And this is why I can give you the very clear answer. We are doing the strongest investments, and we are doing the hardest activities feasible to get independent, and we will be successful.
Thank you very much. And Nick, just look just on your domestic, political point. I would just stress that the Chancellor Rishi is doing an absolutely outstanding job, and as far as possible, as I think I said yesterday, I don't think people's families should be dragged into things. But on your question about arms and how far we're willing to go and the risk of escalation, I just want to say that I think Putin has already escalated the conflict. He's already inflicting systematic slaughter on innocent people. Olaf has rightly described what's going on in Mariupol and elsewhere. It is utterly horrific. And all we are seeking to do is to help the Ukrainians to protect themselves, to protect their families and their homes. And that seems to me morally an entirely reasonable thing to do. Now, as you know, the UK has been mainly so far supplying anti-tank weaponry, anti-aircraft weaponry. What we're now looking at doing is finding ways that we can support friends and partners who want to send other types of equipment that may be useful to them and to the Ukrainians. And I think it's important in these discussions always to to be mindful of what is genuinely useful for Volodymyr Zelensky and his army. And sometimes I think that some of the stuff that some of the kit that NATO has simply wouldn't be appropriate. It may be more useful to support the Ukrainians by backfilling and allowing some of the former Warsaw Pact countries to supply some of their own armour in the way that you've been seeing. And I think that may be something we'll want to consider doing more of. But clearly, the boundary, the limit, is that there is no intention, I don't think, certainly don't believe that the German Chancellor or any NATO leader has any intention of engaging in direct confrontation between our countries and Vladimir Putin. That's how Putin wants to portray this. That is not what this is about. This is about an illegal, barbaric attack by Russia on totally innocent people that we are trying to help to protect themselves. That's what's going on. Can I just say one thing also about your question about the amount of cash that has gone from Europe to pay for Russian oil and gas, and compared to the just don't bear in mind the huge steps that the EU are already taking, that Olaf and the Germans are already taking to move away from oil and gas. The dependency has been massive. It's clearly been something that they're now moving away from very, very fast. I think by middle of 2024, as I recall, Germany is going to stop using Russian gas, which is quite extraordinary. And that is going to be done through technological change and progress. And we want to work together with Germany to achieve that. Jörg Blank, DPA.
Eine Frage an Sie beide.
Right, I have a question to you both, Federal Chancellor and you, Prime Minister. As far as the weapons is concerned and the delivery of heavy weapons is concerned, are you willing and ready, Prime Minister, to send tanks to Ukraine? And one question to you, Ukraine actually wanted to have Marder tanks by Rheinmetall. 1 per day would suffice. Why would you not send such weapons to Ukraine?
I think I tried to answer the question before. I'm in principle willing to consider anything by way of defensive weaponry to help the Ukrainians protect themselves and their people. I think it's important that we should be giving equipment that is genuinely useful and that is operable by the Ukrainians. That's our consideration. Those, as I'm sure you saw, there was a delegation from Ukraine, from the Ukrainian Defence Ministry here in the UK yesterday, looking at what more we have to offer.
Ich kann da unmittelbar anschließen. Es ist so, dass
Allow me to follow up. We are trying to send those weapons which are helpful, that can be used. We did so in the past, and we're going to continue to do that. And the successes by the Ukrainian military show that we sent effective weapons, anti-tank weapons, a lot of ammunition and everything that goes with that. And at the same time, indeed, as the Prime Minister just said, we have to take a close look what can be used effectively. And these are very technical questions indeed.
Thank you. Jason Groves, Daily Mail.
Thank you. Prime Minister, on the domestic front, did you know that Rishi Sunak's wife was a non-dom yourself? And there are reports today that people close to you, people in number 10, have been briefing against the Chancellor. What would you say to them? Are they speaking in your name, or does he have your full support on this issue? And Chancellor Scholz, I heard what you said about Russian energy, but you'll know that Germany is sending huge amounts of money to Russia for fuel at the moment. When you see those atrocities in Ukraine, when you hear the mayor of Kiev talk about blood money, do you feel a sense of shame over that? And is the Prime Minister right that you're planning to end gas imports from Russia by 2024?
Jason, let me say, I think the answers to your question are, number one, no. Number two, if there are such briefings, they're certainly not coming from us in number 10, heaven knows where they are coming from. And number three, I think the answer is emphatically yes. I think that Rishi is doing an absolutely outstanding job.
It is clear that we are having a big job to do to get independent from the imports of fossil resources, and this is mostly about coal, oil and gas. And as you know, we are working very hard to be successful with this in the case of coal and oil during this year. In the case of gas, as I said, it is absolutely necessary that we build the infrastructure for being able to do so. It is not feasible to get gas instead from Russia today, from other places in the amount we needed, and this is the same with most of the other countries in Eastern Europe or also in the south. So it is a big investment into infrastructure and not just the question of finding new suppliers on other places of the world, which we are doing and which we are working on. It's also the question how we can get this gas to our country, because it's not helping if it's somewhere in a ship. It needs to be transported, and this is something for engineers and for investments, billions of investments, and we are doing it. And this is why we are quite we're optimistic that we will get rid of the need of importing gas from Russia very soon, and as the Prime Minister said, and we are working tough to be successful. Let me also say that the miscalculation of Putin is something that is really bothering him each day more. He knows the sanction regime is working, and this is also on financial sanctions against the central bank, for instance. The outcome of this is that he is not able to use the money he put in the storages and on his accounts. It was a huge mass of money which could serve him for a long time, but he is not able to get to all these resources for financing his war. And this is why our sanction on certain banks and also on the central bank are so successful and so necessary, to be very clear. But he is also bothering about his mistake, because when all the countries in Europe and at many other places that are fighting for democracy and supporting Ukraine are taking decisions similar to Germany, this will have an impact on its economic expectations. Because if the war would be over, no one could believe that we will stop our investments, that we will stop our view to other countries that could generate the necessary supply. And this is, in the case of his economy, a very, very big damage, because if you understand that he is not having industrial sectors that are really earning money from exporting to the rest of the world, it is a problem if his chance to export gas, oil, coal, silver, uranium and all the other things to other countries is not that successful anymore. He has a problem for the development of his economy. And we were also tough on other aspects, for instance, high technology goods. We are working on being more precise in these fields in questions of IT and software. And all these things together will make it impossible for him to develop his country to an economic strength that gives him the chance to be a competitor on markets with other countries that are more successful in the economic sector. And so I think we are tough and we will be successful with what we do.
Thanks very much, Olaf. Heike Buser from RTL.
Thank you very much. I have a question to both of you. You Prime Minister and you Chancellor, do you have plans to travel to Kiev yourself in order to show your solidarity with Ukraine? And for you both, is there a certain timetable for that? And if you allow, the French president is come under heavy criticism by the Poles for speaking to the Russian president regularly. Do you both believe that it actually pays off and is worth talking to Vladimir Putin on the phone? And if you allow me to ask, how do you are you in touch personally with the Russian president?
Well, thanks, Heiko. Let me just say first of all that I last spoke to Putin shortly before the invasion, and you can imagine the type of conversation that we had. He said he had no such plans. I said that it would be a catastrophe for Russia if he went ahead, as well as a catastrophe for the wider region, for the world, and so it has proved. That's the last time I spoke to him. I've got to say, I think that negotiating with Putin does not seem to me to be full of promise, and I don't feel that he can be that he can be trusted. That's not to say I don't admire the efforts of people who try to find a way through, but my own view is that I am deeply, deeply sceptical, and I'm afraid cynical now about his assurances.
Schönen Dank für die Frage.
Thank you very much for this question. The criticism voiced with regards to the French president is unjustified. To put it clearly, he was very committed, and in his talks to the Ukrainian president, but also in his talks with the Russian president, he tries to make his contribution to actually that we have the opportunity to achieve a ceasefire and a withdrawal of Russian troops. I know that very well because I am in close contact with the French president, just like with President Biden and Boris and many others. It is very important that we have a clear stance. Only the Ukrainians will negotiate about their country, about Ukraine. There's no one who talks to Putin who would like to replace Ukraine. We try to exchange information and bolster their position, and to tell the Russian president how the situation truly is, and to inform him about the extent and the numbers of the killed Russian soldiers, because this has tremendous repercussions for the Russian army, the extent of destruction of Russian weaponry that cannot be used in Ukraine anymore. We inform him about the fact that his invasion, as he planned it, did not move forward the way he had intended to. So these are things that he may not hear from his inner circle. So it's good that others tell him that. And of course, time and again, it is important to come back to what we want to achieve. And what we really want to achieve is a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, that we're seeing Russian troops withdrawing, that Ukraine can decide on its destiny, that this war comes to an end. And it remains necessary to say this. We can all be sure, you can all be assured that we are in close coordination. We will continue to do that. And I said it at the outset, only Ukrainians will negotiate about Ukraine, and no one else is going to replace them. But we will support Ukraine, we will strengthen them and lend direct contributions so that they're in a good negotiating position, militarily, financially, and with the sanctions that we impose. Allow me, and are you planning a trip to Kyiv? We inform each other and the press when we're starting our trip, actually.
We're trying to help people come from Ukraine. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help our German friends to take more refugees as well. Seb Payne, Financial Times.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Chancellor Scholz, what would you say to those who argue the stability of Europe demands an embargo on Russian energy demands, and that Germany should accept the economic price of that, just as it demanded southern European members pay the price during the sovereign debt crisis? And during a meeting of EU foreign ministers on Monday, why are you not discussing an oil embargo? And Prime Minister, there's been reports that Chancellor Rishi Sunak held a green card while he was a government minister. Do you think it's acceptable for a member of your government to have a US green card? I believe you were a US citizen and gave it up at one point as well. And given that you've talked about European security and unity and purpose, can you now rule out triggering Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, given the situation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I answered to your question already.
Thanks very much. Seb, I'm sorry to have to postpone you this morning. Just to say, look, on the that issue, as I understand it, the Chancellor has done absolutely everything he was required to do. And what was your second question?
It was about triggering Article 16.
Triggering Article 16. Olaf, we had a discussion about this. As you can expect, it came up. I think I raised it.
What was the result of that discussion?
It was entirely predictable, and I don't. The almost seamless harmony that you've observed between Britain and Germany today, I would not wish in any way to interrupt by going into that any further. But all I will say is that to answer your question, would we take that off the table? The use of Article 16? No, clearly not. There is a problem, but I think that there is. As I hope has been clear from the conversation and from what you've heard from Olaf and me today, that we are really very much united on virtually every other issue of policy. Suzanne Ebner of R&D.
So Prime Minister, Boris Chancellor Scholz, my question goes to both of you. Can Western sanctions ever be really effective while countries like India and China continue business as usual with Russia?
Suzanne, I think it's a very important question. I think that the answer is that yes, Western sanctions can be, and as Olaf said in his earlier remarks, will be increasingly effective. And I think that they will, over the long term, do more and more damage to the economic prospects of Putin's regime. And that doesn't mean to say we don't want other friends and partners around the world to do more. And I think that for China, there's a very interesting question to be addressed, and that is whether they really want to be associated closely with what is being done in Mariupol, in Bucha, whether they really want to be associated with in any way condoning or in any way supporting the regime of Vladimir Putin. And I think as the days have gone by, that question has become increasingly difficult for China. That is my impression.
Ich stimme zu.
I agree, and allow me to add. The sanctions that we've imposed so far have a tremendous effect on the economic prospects of Russia. And these sanctions cannot be circumvented when we're talking about the high technology products and other products. Because many countries have such high advances technologically that there are no other countries that can chip in and replace. There are many activities in the field of high tech, And this is why these sanctions are so effective, even though not everyone is participating. But we're advocating, campaigning for others to chime in, and we still we want to make sure that no one is attempting to circumvent these sanctions, and we do this in direct talks. And I think this also is highly effective.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Danke schön. Thank you. Oh.